Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the Dadhood podcast. It has been a while since we've had an episode, but we are now back with episode 11. This episode is with Zarrar. He's a father that has to deal with a child that has severe allergies. He also works in a high position in the sales industry, and also he is an avid reader. So I'm sure you'll find this episode very interesting and beneficial. If you are new, please do make sure that you subscribe to our channel, and you can follow myself on Instagram at Shoaib Muhammad for more dad related content. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the Dadhood podcast, and today I'm joined by good friend Zarrar. Zarrar is here. He's going to be taking us through multiple different things and some very unique things, especially in terms of relating to his son, his allergies that he has, and how he, as a father, deals with that, and also a few other things in terms of career, time management. But let's see how the conversation goes. Welcome, Zarar. The first question that we're going to give to you, what we usually start off with our guests, is how many children do you have? I kind of already spoiled it by saying that you have a son. But how old were you when you had your son as well?
Assalamu alaikum, bro. First of all, Jazakallah khair. Thank you for inviting me onto the podcast. Very honored. Um, yeah, so I have one son. His name is Musa, and he is 3 years old now. So that would have made me just turn 30 when I had my son.
Okay.
Scary, but good. Good to be a parent.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Did you time that to like hit your 30s? Like, I'm going to have my son at my 30s, not before and not after?
No, actually, you know what? I wanted to have my son a bit early with my wife, but we had a number of sort of pre-existing plans that would have just made it difficult, very difficult. And so it was just kind of a practical thing that just happened at the time. So not very clearly planned, but alhamdulillah, it was the right time for me.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. That's good. That's good. Obviously we've been chatting for a while about a number of different things. Whenever we meet up, it can be to do with fatherhood. It can be to do with reading because we know that you're an avid reader. It could be to do with time management, about career. But I think where I want to start off with is, and where I found your perspective to be quite unique, is when you told me that your son has a number of allergies, and you and your wife have to be very careful and very sensitive about that. And actually, it's not. Was it? I can't remember, but I think you said it wasn't something that you expected. Or these number of allergies, you didn't really expect them to occur in your children. So when your son was born and when the checks were happening, takes you by surprise. So how did you and your wife start to deal with that, and what were some of the allergies, and how do you now even currently manage some of those?
Yeah, actually, it's something that I completely didn't expect. When my son was born, of course, the doctors tell you really healthy, normal, alhamdulillah. Pregnancy went well, smoothly. The delivery went smoothly. Um, and then I think it was about maybe 7 months in or 8 months in when we started to introduce some other foods outside of what is natural from mother. And actually, my parents-in-law came from abroad, and I think this was close to about the 8 or 9 month sort of time period, or when my son was born, after he was born, and we decided to take my parents-in-law out to a restaurant just to it's a nice thing to do, and we went to a Lebanese restaurant, and as you get hummus and you get tahini, which is sesame seed oil that is mixed into the hummus. And at this point, we have no idea that my son has any kind of issues with food because we've been, experimenting with different things. We haven't really seen any negative consequences of any food,
Right.
and without
And
thinking
was
really,
this his first time going to a restaurant or eating out?
this was his first time going out to a restaurant. So we were a bit
Okay.
like, okay, let's be cautious. Let's see, let's just be cautious. We don't know, right? However, my son had hummus before. So I was very confident. Yeah, I was very
Mm.
confident that this is no issue for him. We got some bread, maybe dipped it in less than half an inch of hummus, gave it to him, and within about 30 seconds, his lip had swollen up, his pathways for his air started to swell up, and he was crying like crazy.
And he was about almost a year old, you said?
Yeah, he was just under a year, maybe 9 months old. So we were very scared. Like he was breaking out in spots, and he was really uncomfortable. Obviously, a tiny baby can't communicate what's going on, but we can physically see a
Mm,
severe reaction to something. And at the time, we didn't quite pinpoint what it was because he had tried a few different things. Right, he had some chicken, he had some anyway, so we're in a panic. So I got my parents-in-law just come from abroad from Pakistan, and it's like day three of them here, and first time taking them to a restaurant, and I find myself like driving like a madman in a car to get my son to the nearest hospital. And alhamdulillah, on the way, well, my son actually, his airways were really getting like stuck really, and we didn't know what to do. And obviously we were quite worried. But at one point, he actually vomited in the car, and alhamdulillah, I think that kind of cleared up some of what was going on.
okay.
But obviously, it was a manic situation because I'm the driver, my son's in the car seat next to me, my wife and her parents are in the back, and my wife is trying to like pat my son so all the vomit comes out. But alhamdulillah, managed to get that sorted. Went to the hospital, and they said your son has nut allergies, and he must have eaten something. And we just started to play back what happened, and we realized it must have been the tahini sauce
That
and the
Yeah, of course. Oh my God, that I couldn't imagine that being in that situation, how scary it must be. I mean, you're laughing at it now, looking back on it, and it can kind of maybe become a fond memory at family gatherings and whatnot. Do you remember when you went out and this happened? But I'm sure at the time your heart was racing, your wife's heart was racing, everybody was worried because you had no idea what it was gonna be, and alhamdulillah, it turned out to be a common allergy, which is a nut allergy, and there's a lot of medication and there's a lot of ways to kind of get around that and solve that. Of course, um, it can in extreme cases be quite fatal, but alhamdulillah, it wasn't because I'm sure like if it was me. I'm probably thinking it's gonna be the worst thing in the world, and this is gonna go really, really wrong. So, how what was going through your mind at the time when she said nut allergy? Were you like relieved that okay, like obviously it's not amazing to have a nut allergy, but were you relieved that it wasn't something worse?
yeah. I mean, I was just glad it was a reaction to something, and it wasn't like in that moment like
Yeah.
a life threatening. I mean, it was in a sense because the nut allergy, it can lead, as you say, to a life threatening situation, and because it
Yeah.
blocks the airways in the sun, in my son's case, it is actually life threatening. But the quantity that he had ingested was so small that
Okay.
it was sort of manageable. So the way that the doctors explained my son's case is that it can lead to very serious consequences, but there's like a two-step process that you take when you have a child with allergies like this. So the first step is they need antihistamines in their system. So usually that's delivered in like a liquid form. So you would just drink like a equivalent of like a Piriton tablet that we would have if we have hay fever, for example. And that usually calms my son down quite well. Within about half an hour, he's chilled. If it's something more significant, and my son has other allergies, and this is where it really comes into play, is you need an EpiPen. So that's
Okay.
something that you would many people must know about. This is it's like a adrenaline shot that you basically ingest into your thigh, and that just pushes that through your system and relieves the symptoms of an allergic reaction. But I
Mm.
do know of other people who actually have even severer nut allergies than my son. I actually read of a story as well of someone on a plane where someone actually opened a bag of nuts and it was
Yeah,
an
I've heard of
airborne.
this.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
crazy. Like someone actually died from an airborne peanut um, bag that was circulated through the cabin. And so I think some airlines are now banning the use of nuts, and actually it's becoming more prevalent, right? Like a lot of my friends in the local area, they also have similar conditions. My son has eczema, for example, and apparently there's some link between nut allergies and eczema, which I don't really
Right.
know, understand. I don't think doctors know either, but it is quite common, I find these days.
Right. So after the nut allergy, how did you guys then go about? dealing with that. You know, there are many foods that contain nuts, and you don't want to deprive your child of any nutrition or any foods. And also, if you in you know in the household, if your wife or yourself, you're cooking certain meals for yourself, it's easy just to feed that to your child. So how did you guys go about doing it?
So actually, it was quite difficult for, I'd say, the next year after that point, because we had a number of other incidences. Because many foods, especially when you're cooking in like Asian household, sometimes you have like pre-made masalas or spices, right? And sometimes there are trace quantities of things that my son is allergic to. So initially, we were like, okay, let's stay clear of nuts completely. Let's make it a nut-free environment. Although I was so upset with that because I love having different nuts in the house. It's been tough for me, but it's the right thing to do. So we cleared out nuts from our house, and we then started to feed our son various kind of Asian foods that we would be eating, right? And we noticed he would always be like scratchy and like get red. And we're like, "Oh, there's something here that we're missing. There must be some other allergies, right?" And so over time, actually, we did some trial and error. We did like a food diary, which is recommended by the NHS as well, which is just take a 7-day check of what you're feeding your child and note down any reactions and try and isolate what other foods could be affecting your child. And through that process, we essentially ruled out quite a few other things. So, like, he has an issue with eggs, which is a big issue because it's found in a lot of different foods. He has a bit of a sensitivity to certain milk. Cow's milk is a bit better with goat's milk, or oat milk, which is not based on those animals. Um, and really, we just adjusted his meal plans from ours. So he does eat slightly better than us, to be honest. Like, he has a very well prepared meal plan, and we're just really careful based on the allergies we know of. But this was at, say, I would say a year and a half. But there was then like several other issues that we started to notice, and this is where it became really tricky. So I was speaking actually to another brother that we both know, lovely brother called Ibrahim, and he lives in the Slough area, not far from me, and his child also had some allergies, and he actually recommended me a website that you can submit a request to check against 250 various food groups or food types, and they send you a report back and let you know what you're sensitive to. And we did that. Essentially, they take a hair sample and they test um, your hair, and we came back with a laundry list of various things that could affect my son. And although it was scary to see that, because you're like, what do I feed? What do I feed my son? Because he's allergic to everything in the world. You kind of adjust over time. And my wife has, alhamdulillah, she's been really great at sort of adjusting to his needs. Although it is a bit of extra work, I would say.
We're back just after some technical difficulties. You can see Sarah's got a pair of headphones on now, so hopefully any sound issues will be fixed from here on. So we were speaking about how you got this sample from the doctors that you send a hair sample over, they test it, and then it comes back with anything that your son might be sensitive to that might cause any sort of allergic reactions. So from then on, so what were some of those things? And from then on, how did you and your wife manage to kind of change your whole lifestyle and I mean, I'm sure it's not easy, or like it hasn't become like at this point, not that it's probably not second nature because you still have to be careful, but I'm sure you've managed some systems, created some systems within your life that have made it a bit more manageable to look out for these things and to be careful with certain foods around your son.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess the first thing is that I live, my parents also live with me, which is alhamdulillah, it's a blessing. They have their own interesting dietary requirements. So what happens is, in the house, we go for our sort of shopping runs, our Sainsbury's or Tesco's, etc. And sometimes things get missed. So normally I would, before I buy something new, that we haven't really had in the house before, I just check the back of the packet, make sure there's no clear, like allergy issues for my son. But sometimes it's forgotten by my parents or my brother or or other people in the house. And so what we do is we just make sure before we give Musa anything, we double check the packaging. We also make things pretty much from scratch for him that we know are safe and are not on the red list. And in terms of the actual list, there are quite a variety of things that my son has sensitivities to. But the way that they rate it is through what they call like a RAG status, or like a traffic light status, so a red, amber, green system. So red is he cannot have that particular food because it's
Right.
dangerous for him. Amber or orange is he has a sensitivity to it, so there's a chance it would affect him. And then sort of green or yellow is a very low sensitivity to it, so he can have it in certain quantities. And
Okay.
surprisingly, like I'll give you an example. My son, he loves strawberries. Yeah, mashallah, he loves strawberries. Um, However, the report says he has an orange status, a sensitivity towards it. Now
Right.
he can eat it, and on some days he's absolutely fine, and he can have like 15 strawberries, no problem, mashallah. Other days he'll have like two or three, and he's like scratching, he's red, and he has to have an
Oh my
antihistamine.
gosh.
So what we try to do is use the test rag status as a guideline to say, okay, this is definitely a no, and here's some green and amber, and really just vary his diet and see if he kind of develops over time. Because one thing that we were advised by the doctors is children can actually outgrow some allergies, even including actually symptoms like eczema can be outgrown by some children.
Right.
So really, the recommendation was to experiment and see how things go, and have regular checks with the doctors. So every year, we'll actually do something which is a bit more of a accurate test, which is a blood-based test. So it's like a prick test, where allergies are tested for. The hair sample allergy test is not quite as accurate according to the doctors, but it just is an easier way to test for a number of things. So that's why we take that as a rough guide and not as like the gospel truth, because we know my son can eat, for example, the vegetable peppers you get.
Yeah. Yeah.
He They said that he has a sensitivity towards that. However, I think the week that we did the test, he just ate lots of that stuff, so it probably just showed up on the chart somewhere because he eats it just
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
So
So yeah, you have to also take it sort of case by case, that every child is going to react slightly differently to some of these scientific lists that are given out, and the methods are, are quite general in a way. They don't
yeah,
for each child might react differently. So you as parents really have to sort of decide and see and experiment, and get to understand your child and his
mm.
sensitivities, rather than just kind of textbook following the list. It's quite interesting.
And that's a great point because now that my son is at an age where he's starting to communicate with us, a few words here and there, he's able to sort of say, "Oh, daddy, tummy," or like something's uncomfortable. So then we can kind of retrospectively think back and say, what has he just had that has caused him to feel that way? And if it's something that is an anomaly, we're like, okay, that's what it was. It was something that he's not had before. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, so my son, because he has eczema, one of the triggers for eczema is citrus. So things like lemons, limes, oranges, etc. We have recently started to introduce oranges to him. Um, and you can imagine, like, my son has had a very bland diet for the last couple of years because of the allergies. Like, he's eating potatoes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
For him to have an orange is like a new experience. Like, he's like,
Yeah.
wow, this tastes so great. So he had two complete kind of easy peel oranges,
Yeah.
and he was like, "Daddy, tummy itchy." So we're like, okay, there is a bit of a sensitivity there.
Right. Okay.
But I was saying a couple of weeks ago, my wife saw a video on YouTube about, I guess, children reacting to various fruits and stuff like that. So she saw one with lemons, and obviously hilarious and very cute. And she said, "Do you want to try it with our son? Because obviously he has sensitivity, and lemons are right up there with sensitivities." I said, "Yeah, let's just give it a try." And so Musa had just a little lick of lemon, and he was like, "Wow," because he's not really had very much flavor in his life. And then he kind of just took it off me and like just ate like half a lemon by himself. And we were like, "Oh my god, he's gonna like either he's gonna react and we're gonna have a problem, or he's gonna be like, what is this? It's so bitter, right?" But he was just
Yeah.
like enjoying it. He was like, "Yeah, this is so
Oh
good."
my God.
So he ate the whole thing. He ate half a lemon.
Oh, that is hilarious. You need to record some of his reactions to new foods, man. And then when he grows up, just make a montage and show him how he reacted. That's so funny.
Yeah, exactly. Mashallah.
Oh,
So
subhanallah.
yeah, he's mashallah, he's getting better with food. Now that also, by the way, he's gone to nursery, we've had
Okay.
to really think about that as well, which I'm happy to go into detail.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yep.
I mean, we're actually looking at nurseries right now for my
Okay.
son. So
Yeah.
he's gonna, we're hopefully gonna get him to join from January because his
So,
birthday is actually next week. So he turns 3 next week. And then
okay.
I think how it works with the kind of 15-hour funding or whatnot that you
Yeah.
get from the government, you have to wait like one term after their birthday to kind of join in. So
Yeah.
right now we're spending kind of this month just looking at nurseries, and we're gonna sign him up soon. So this will be
Mashallah.
good to know in terms of your experience of how they deal with kids with allergies. Alhamdulillah, my son doesn't have allergies, but it'll be good to know because it gives me a different insight into nursery culture in a way.
Yeah, and any parents that are about to go on this, this next step, sending your children to nursery, and they have children nut allergies, I hope this really helps because I wish I had someone to inform me of this. So, so firstly, because of COVID, you cannot really go into the facility to check it out when there are kids present, basically, and that's really when the nursery staff are available to show you anyway. So I had to firstly assess the nurseries in my area by booking an appointment with them and having a look at rooms that were unoccupied to see how they would interact with the children in that environment and also
Yeah.
ask all of my questions because obviously I'm concerned as a parent about my son's allergies. I was very rest assured by the nursery team. Uh, I met with the head of the nursery and like the deputy who oversees the assistants in the nursery,
Yeah.
and they walked through how they approach the whole allergy situation. So, firstly, this nursery is a nut-free environment, which I think maybe all nurseries are like that, from my understanding. Um, and they have a strict policy, so they don't allow children to bring food from home. Although that's some parents find that difficult because they want to out of love give their children like an apple or other you know food so that they are assured that they are
Okay.
having their nutrition. But um, they have a strict no nut policy because of children with allergies and accommodating for them. And I asked the question because I was also concerned, like,
Was this
mm, mm.
specific to this nursery that you visited, or is this like a general policy?
Yeah, so I visited two nurseries. Both of them said the same thing. So I
Okay.
just assumed that all nurseries are the same, but maybe something to check.
Okay.
So when I spoke to them about my son, I was also concerned. I was like, I would like to actually give my son like an apple or a snack that I know is on his safe list of things he
Mm.
can eat. And they said strictly no, because what if, for instance, a child has some interaction with nuts and then picks up an apple from home, and then your son interacts with that? You're going to have an issue, right? And I said, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So they said that's why it's a strictly no food from home policy. And then they walk through how their procedures for cooking or preparing food
Mm.
in their kitchens. So they supply a menu for breakfast, snack, and lunch, and maybe like a post-lunch snack. And they have divided sections in their kitchen, and they have a red plate system. So what that means is, first of all, vegetarian food is cooked in isolation to meats.
Okay.
They don't provide halal at this particular nursery.
Yeah.
Um, but they have like a fixed supply chain, so we can't even say can we supply halal because they go through a
Sure.
specific contractor. So we opted for vegetarian, obviously, and that vegetarian food is prepared in isolation. But even further, they use separate utensils and separate ingredients for cooking vegetarian food, and then they have a red plate system. The red plate system is we cook the food for children with allergies, assign them to red plates, and then we seal them. And then when it's time to eat the food, we chaperone the child and make sure that nobody else interacts with them while they eat. So it's a very safe, kind of clean,
Wow.
end-to-end environment. They actually mentioned that to encourage the children's education, they get the children to serve each other. So one
Okay.
child or two child or three children are nominated to take the plates from like just outside the kitchen area up into the rooms, and then place them in front of the right other children, um,
Right.
and trying to get them to explain what they have on the plate, which is a great thing. However, because my son has allergies, he can't risk that interaction.
Sure.
So what they said was, just be rest assured, although there's a little bit of a lack of opportunity to educate in that way, don't worry, because we're still with your child and it's a safety thing. And I was absolutely fine with that, because I'd rather have that comfort in mind that he's going
Yeah.
outside now, he's not at home, and he's okay. So alhamdulillah, they were very professional, and hats off to them. I think uh, it would have been difficult for me to part with my son
Yeah.
if it was a bit tenuous. So alhamdulillah.
How's it been so far?
Alhamdulillah, he's been at nursery. He's actually unwell last week, so he's been off for a little while. But alhamdulillah, he's had no issues. He comes back towards the end of the day. So what happens is at nursery, you have to ring a bell, and they have several classes. So they have like badgers, owls, etc. And my son is, I think, in badgers. And when you press the bell, it makes a sound inside the room. And so all the children know, okay, it's home time now, or someone's
Right.
coming now. So some children get a bit emotional because they see other
It's
children
not their
going.
parent. Yeah.
It's not my mummy and daddy coming. So Musa, towards the end of the day, he gets a bit emotional apparently, and he's like, "Where's my mum and
Ah.
daddy? I want to see them." But alhamdulillah, he's adapted to it very well. They do something called settling in, bro. So when your
Okay.
child first goes, they don't go in like for a full session, like a full five
Right.
hours or whatever it is, because they know children need time to get used to the environment. So they first do like an hour or two, and then they do like
Mm.
a 3 hour, and then like a full session, depending on how
Okay.
your child is. So
Mm.
alhamdulillah, I think you get taken cared of. Yeah.
Okay. And what have you noticed in his development so far? Obviously, it's probably only been a
Mm.
couple of weeks. But what's changed since he's gone to
Okay.
nursery?
So a little bit of context. When I went to Umrah a couple of years ago, alhamdulillah, and I met this lovely brother, actually a family, and they were based. I think they were based. I want to say West Coast. I can't remember exactly where.
Okay.
Actually, no. In fact, I'm mistaken. They're in Florida. They're near Florida,
Okay.
and
Okay.
they were both doctors, physicians. And I was speaking to this brother, and I said, I'm really concerned about my son. He's sort of between the age of 1.5 to 2, and he's not really communicating yet. Should I be worried? And he said to me, bro, relax. Like children develop at varying speeds and they develop in different areas. So this is perfectly normal. Is he able to comprehend what you're saying? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Like when I say something, I know he gets it because
Yeah.
if I instruct him to do something, he does it. So he said, okay, well, that part of the brain is separate to language communication. So if your son is not able to say that to you, but is able to comprehend, you're in a good place. So
Right.
coming back to your question, what have I seen in development with my son now that he's gone to nursery? I would say his communication is starting to improve. So he's a bit shy and hesitant in new situations. Okay, at home he's like a different character. He's very energetic, mashallah. He loves to scream and shout the house down, alhamdulillah. But outside he's very pensive and tentative and
Right.
kind of reserved. But now he's starting to get comfortable in other surroundings. And
Okay.
one of the things I try to do on the weekends as well, I have a friend who owns like a corner shop not far from my house. So
Mm.
I always pop in there, and mashallah, they're Muslim brothers who run the shop. So I often get him to kind of interact with my son, and he has
Right.
quite um, a very boisterous kind of personality, which my
Okay. Yeah.
son is
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
really. So it gets
Yeah.
him
Yeah.
talking and stuff. So alhamdulillah, I would say the biggest improvement is communication with others. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. That's amazing. Alhamdulillah.
Mm.
Yeah, like when me and my wife are thinking about kind of obviously nursery and that whole stage, we we're confident in Issa's my son Issa, his ability to communicate and to be social and things like that. He's always been like that. But I
Mm.
think his his kind of social confidence goes too far, where he then becomes too energetic, and it can turn into violence, and it can turn into physical interactions and all that kind of stuff. So he's got too much energy, and we're hoping that
Mashallah.
with him being in a nursery environment where he has to react to other kids' emotions, that situation will help him to understand how he's meant to channel his energy properly. Because when he's at home and he just has a younger sister, he thinks he can do whatever he wants. He can snatch a toy off her. He can run around. Even at families, going to families' home, he's not shy to just run up and down, jump on people's beds, etc. And even in the park, it's not kind of a set environment where where everybody in that environment is looking to develop their child and control their you know what I mean. It's just a park. People go there to play. So
Yeah.
all of these different environments, he will just go crazy. And so we're hoping nursery is the one where he kind of gets channeled, sort of. That's what I'm hoping. So let's see
Mashallah.
what happens.
Well, you raised a very interesting point, which you know, I think some people that I've interacted with recently are like they're asking me, how do you encourage your son, especially around like reading and educating your
Mm,
child? And I often say like, well, I don't really force my child in a lot of things actually. Like, yes, it's good to have some level of discipline and structure, which I happy to share what I do. But actually, I try to figure out where his interests lie and what his
yeah,
strengths seem to be, and I try to just inspire him to learn. So it isn't really for me restricted to like kind of like an academic view. It's more of like
yeah,
I go to the park with my son, and there's something quite powerful about experiential learning, in my
yeah.
opinion. You know, my son, he loves football. He loves football. He's got a great left peg. You know, he's really powerful with the left foot. The right foot needs a bit of work, but what I do is I just I always ping him the ball on the right, so to try and get him to be a bit dexterous with both feet. Um,
Yeah,
but alhamdulillah, like that for me is learning. Like how do I interact with other children in the park, older children, younger children? I don't let my son stay restricted to like the playground. I let him play with
yeah.
7 year olds, 8 year olds, 9 year olds, and even last week there was a kid in the local park. I was asking him, he was 7 years old, and he was teaching my son like high five, low five, and like oh, you're too slow, that kind of thing. And I know that some parents that I know of, I think they make a slight mistake where they say, "Oh, I don't want my son to experience any negativity." And actually, I
Mm,
think it's very bad thing. You're hindering your child's development. I think they need to understand that people can play like these little pranks, like "Oh, too slow" is
yeah.
it's part of being in the world.
Mm,
So yeah, very much a for me an experiential learning is very valuable, as well as more of a book learning type activity, right?
mm. Okay. So yeah, do go into it. What are some
Mm,
of the things outside of nursery would you do with Musa?
mm,
Would you sort of I guess carry on what's happening in nursery? So would you try to solidify whatever he's doing at nursery and kind of replicate that at home? Would you look at introducing something else so that he's exposed to other things that he might not get at nursery?
mm.
And like you said, it's not always just academic style learning. It's not just sitting down and getting him to color in a sheet that teaches him numbers or letters.
Yeah.
You're saying that there's a lot more experiential things out there.
Yeah, and this is actually a reflection on my own self. Like um, I remember I was again. I think it was about a year ago. I was speaking to a teacher. So my cousin's wife is a teacher in the US, and we were talking about the difference between sitting and reading a book about flowers. Let's say a tulip, right? You can read all the technical specifications of what it is to be a tulip, but
Yeah.
to go out into the world and experiencing a tulip, to smell its fragrance or to look at its color or whatever, is something that cannot be learned from sitting
Mm.
in a room. So I try and find a bit of a balance. And in terms of nursery, I let them do their thing, and I see it almost as an activity in isolation because I know that they're
Okay.
developing certain skills. But what I
Yeah.
do is taking a bit of inspiration from one of the shiyukh that we study with. I
Yeah.
remember he was talking about what it means to be a man, yeah, and talking about developing courses like rajulun. Let's make some real men. And
Yeah.
one of the things I spoke to Sheikh in isolation about was I wrestle. I would like to wrestle with my son like at the time, and he's like, yeah, encourage like physical behavior in your children because they need to have that, especially boys, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
And my son, every time I see him after he comes from nursery, I'm like, Daddy's wrestling, and I run up to him and I give him like a wrap around, and he loves it. He loves jumping on me. I think this is education, in my opinion. Um,
Mm.
Montessori schools are another great example of that because they're
Yeah.
all interacting with nature or the physical world, and they actually have that as their pedagogy or their method.
Yeah.
So I think it does have value. I think, as I said before, uh, some parents I know really coddle their children. They protect them from any kind of pain or suffering. But I actually
Yeah.
do the other way around. I say, okay, if
Yeah.
he falls, he falls. Let him fall.
Yeah.
Let him understand what it
Yeah.
means to fall, right? Because it sets you up for the real world. The
I
real
think
world
I think it's
isn't.
easier. I'm
Yeah.
like that as well, and I think it's easier for us as fathers to do that compared to the mothers, because generally in maybe a typical home setting,
Mm,
the wife is maybe around the children a lot more than the dad is during
mm,
the day. You know, if the wife doesn't work and the dad works, etc. In a kind of typical household, and so for her to spend so much time with the child, taking care of the child, looking after the child, and then to see them get hurt, their immediate reaction is going to be when I need to continue what I'm doing, which is caring for the child and taking care of the child. Whereas for
yeah.
us, maybe we're not there during the whole day and then we see him fall over. We're like, ah, just get up. Come on. Come on. Come
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah.
Carry
So
on.
I always say to my son, like, obviously he doesn't understand this yet, but I always say, whatever happens in the park stays in the park. Well, my mum can put, the kisses on you later, but alhamdulillah, he does really well with other children, especially if they're older as well. And I think it's
Okay.
good. I guess, from more of a I guess, book perspective. So, like, as
Mm.
you know, I like to read, although I'm a little bit behind on some of the reading I'm doing at the moment. Um,
I was expecting to see a bookshelf behind you.
oh, it's behind me, but it's a bit hidden.
Oh, there you go.
But alhamdulillah, you might have heard the famous quote, and I think it must have been a US president who said something like, leaders are readers. Yeah.
Mm.
So it's a very important skill, and it enriches your understanding of life, of the world, and so I do want to encourage my child to read from an early age, although, as I say, he's 3. So what kind of pressure, it would be unrealistic for you to push your child at such a young age. So I don't really do that, but he does have a small collection of various books that are education focused, like understanding the alphabet or understanding
Yeah.
numbers. And
Yeah.
what I find works really well with my son is trying to associate um, images with letters or things so that he can make
Okay.
that association, right? So A is for apple, like very obvious, right?
Yeah.
Those kind of things. He has a lot of picture books which have um, images of dogs or cats, and then he says like, oh, dog woof or cat meow, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's at this age more than enough. But
Mm.
the what's the kind of learning by osmosis almost, right? So I think in some of your other podcast guests, they've also talked about, you know, uh, modeling the behaviors that you would like to see in your
Yeah.
household. So if you yourself are not reading, how can you expect that your family follows suit? So
Yeah.
whenever I am doing, a little bit of reading, I try and be present around well, let my child be present around me,
Yeah.
and also, my child, he comes and plays in this little workspace that I have, and he's like, oh,
Right.
daddy, books, and he picks them up, and
Yeah.
I don't stop him. Like a lot of parents, I think that I know, like, oh, it's
Yeah.
my precious book collection. Don't touch, play with the toys or whatever. But
That's
I
me.
let, yeah. But alhamdulillah, I let him because although I'd stop him from ripping them up, yeah, like I gave him a chance to see that okay, this is something
Yeah.
to be curious about, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, obviously my books have less pictures in them, so he's more interested in the picture books. But again, like I will start now, like in the next few years, thinking about what does it mean to be an educated person, right? Because this is a
Yeah.
huge question. This is an age-old question, by the way. If you really go back, even in the Western tradition, like you got people like Socrates referring to Plato and some of his thinking, and Aristotle, there's students in the chain. They talk about what does it mean, firstly, to be a human being, right? And what does it mean to have a good society? Like huge,
It's
huge
all of a
questions.
sudden got very deep, Zarrar. It is so
Oh
it's
yeah.
got very existential and philosophical. We're talking about picture books, and now we're talking about what it means to be a human being. Is
So,
this what I can expect from Musa? Is he just reading me a nice story, and the next thing you know, it's a deep conversation with him about life.
Osman, I hope so. I hope he's a deep thinker. But as I say, like I encourage Musa to go wherever he goes. Like as I say, I think he has a great talent for physical stuff. He pays less attention to books. Let's put it that way. But we'll see. And yeah, I guess
So I cut
reading
you
is
off
different,
though.
right? Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I was going to say that I think because it's something innate within us that we want to seek knowledge, and I think it was Aristotle who said something along those lines, that we are knowledge seeking creatures, and we want to know, but what is it to know, right? And these types of deep questions really trouble me, keep me up at night, and that's why I like to read. But the reason why, I think it enriches your understanding of the world, right? And
Yeah.
as my son gets older, I want him to appreciate things like the beauty of the Quran, for example, right?
Yeah.
When you start to study it, not just from a say tadabburi perspective, and try and reflect on its meanings for yourself, but just understanding the linguistics, and the miracle that is the Quran. You can really only get there once you have accumulated certain abilities or capacities, in understanding. And that's what I believe books can do for you. They can enable you, um, and have, let's make an analogy. If you go to the gym, right, you go and you build your muscles, right? And you probably heard this before, but reading is like the gym for your brain, right? You develop
Yeah.
not only tools, but also the energy required to tackle very complex
Yeah.
subjects, right? And so I would love, my ambition is very similar to actually when brother Taha came onto your podcast. I remember he talked about um, the inspiration his father had, and the effect it had on his life, and the influence of our
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah.
Taha's father had an aspiration for his son to attend Eton, and because Taha showed potential, and obviously passed those tests, he was able to achieve that goal. And one of the other key things that I found beneficial from Taha's talk was that environment at Eton allowed him to see that actually, yeah, I can achieve things, that I was encouraged to explore my potential. And that's really what I want to do for my son Musa. I want to
Yeah.
equip him as best as possible, and I think reading is a key part of that development.
100%. I mean, I did a video a few months ago on the YouTube channel on why Muslim dads should read, and
Mm,
it covers pretty much all the points that you've explained.
mm,
Because you reading means that your children would likely to be attached to books and to read.
mm,
And amongst other benefits for yourself, like you said, it trains the brain to then take in more information,
mm,
to then continue to understand things, to then continue to develop knowledge, especially
mm,
in as you said, in looking at the Quran. If your brain is already adapted to reading and to analyzing text and to thinking and pondering over what an author says, then
mm,
it's more likely that you're going to be doing that when it comes to the Quran as well.
mm,
And that might be some of the reasons why, when you do read the Quran, if you're not an avid reader, it
mm.
might be some of the reasons why you feel like you're not connecting as much, amongst many other things, of course,
Yeah.
that are keeping you away from connecting with the Quran. Many things that scholars can explain in terms of sin and iman and things like that. But looking at it just from this angle,
Mm.
that can be one of the reasons why you might not feel so connected.
Yeah, spotlight is such an accurate point, and I think just one piece of general advice that I kind of share with my friends and family is I wasn't really an avid reader actually from a young
Okay.
age, and I think again it's just my personal opinion, but I think Allah provides you with certain openings in your life, right? You might have a physical opening or have gifts around physical strength. You might have emotional or spiritual openings, mental openings, awakenings. And it was only later in life, I think, that I had a bit more of a mental awakening. I was naturally inclined, I think, and gifted by Allah for language. I remember at school, I was terrible at maths, terrible at maths. I couldn't understand it, but I was really able to pick up literature quickly. And so I really lent into that. I think there were things along the way that helped me. Like when I was 9 years old, I was gifted a pocket device that helped with understanding grammar, understanding words, dictionaries, thesaurus, and rules through gamification. So like you would play like Hangman and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And by the way, that's a very important point for children. I think especially gamifying things
Yeah.
helps a lot. But that device, I was hooked to it. Like, and I
Yeah.
remember a very vivid memory. I was 9 years old. I remember it so clearly. It was like a summer's day, and the device was explaining what a plural was.
Right.
And when I understood it, I was like, wow, I've learned something independently. Like I haven't been in a classroom and been instructed. I've
Right.
actually understood, and that really helped my confidence in language. And a few years later, when I was in high school, I was being graded on. I think it was probably close to GCSE time. I was like a level 4 English student, but within like a period of like a year, I was like on like the high, like level 8 or whatever it is now. I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but I achieved like the over. And I
Sure.
tried to think about what that was, and actually, I didn't really do any additional hard work or study. It was just like a natural awakening I think I had.
Yeah.
I was able to read and analyze things based on general teaching from school. So I guess the point being, look out for those awakenings, and
Yeah.
the way that you can speed that up is to practice. Put something in your day that takes you towards your goals. So
Yeah.
if developing yourself mentally is a goal, read and start with not even a page a day, just a line a day. And even if
Yeah.
it is just the Quran, probably the best thing to
Yeah.
read.
Yeah.
So that's a big recommendation.
Yeah.
Take
Yeah.
action.
No, 100%. 100%. 100%. I agree with that. I mean, personally, I guess my fascination with reading was slightly different in the sense that I was more advantaged, I would say, growing up, where I was encouraged a lot.
Mm,
I have fond memories of my auntie, my mom taking me to the library all the
mm,
time and allowing me to take out as many books as I wanted, even though I couldn't manage to read that many. I'd literally come home with like a stack this big, and I know I'm not going to read that much, but they were okay. They would take me all the time whenever I wanted to go, or they would just take me to have a day there, and
mm,
it's like now if we wanted to give our kids an experience, we wouldn't think about the library. But then it was like, let's go to the library. And that was amazing for me. I loved it. And I think libraries are becoming, and I know lots of libraries are being closed down because they're just
mm,
not being used anymore. Obviously, that's because there's a change in technology and things like that. People can access books very easily now, Kindles, etc. But
mm,
I think the experience of being in a building that is surrounded by books, and it has different sections for different things. There's a wonder to that, I think, and especially for children. And you don't have to spend any money either. If you wanted to give your child a bit of an experience, you make them a library card, and as long as that they're good with books and don't rip them, it doesn't become, it's not an expensive hobby. It's actually pretty much a free hobby, and it's a definitely a good experience. And I had that, and then when at school, I was given certificates for my level of reading, for my level of writing, things like
Yeah.
that. So there was always that kind of encouragement. Going towards the end of primary school, I was at parents' evenings. My teachers would say to my mum, give him more books because he's a very good reader and he likes to read, and he's good at writing and things like that. So she would buy me books and allow me to buy books and things like that. And that really set me up for throughout high school, throughout my teenage years, to go find my own books and to read. And now, alhamdulillah, kind of a whole bookshelf. And you know what you said earlier about kind of letting your child take those books off the shelf. I definitely believe in that. I mean, earlier on, when Easter was very small, when we just had him, we decided to get a bookshelf that has doors on it, because he's so small. If
Yeah.
he starts to pull books down, it's gonna hurt him, right? But now what we've done, Sarah, my younger one, she's a bit older now. She's about 15, 16 months. Issa's almost 3 years old. So we've got an open bookshelf now. So the bottom row is all of their books, and then all the other rows are our books. And we allow them to then see those books and to, as you said, pull the books off. Yeah, I am careful. I'm a bit. I cringe a bit when they start pulling them down, because some of those are very, very old books that I have treasured memories with, and they're already kind of tattered on the sides. I don't want them to be tattered anymore, but definitely I allow them to do it because, like you said, it builds their curiosity, and also having their books on the bottom shelf then makes them feel like, I can go over there, I can grab my own books, I can read them, and like you said, I will also try to sit down in front of them when I'm reading my books or when I'm reading Quran, and try to get them to hear. And that's
Yeah.
even whilst they're just playing. If they're in front of me, they're playing with their toys, I'll try to sit there with a book. If as long as I have the time, I usually try and do it in the morning before I start work. And that kind of, I'm hoping that my when I do that, my imagination is always like, when they grow up, they will say things like, my dad was always reading. My dad was, or he always had a book in his hands. And you hear that from certain successful people now when they reflect upon some of the things their
Yeah.
parents did in their childhood. They say things like, my dad used to maybe always smile, or my dad used to have good manners, or my dad was always you know or even the negatives. The kids remember the negatives. My dad was always stressed out. My dad was always angry. So I want to make sure they have as many of these positive experiences where they can say, my dad did this and my dad did that. And part of those things is reading, because I'm hoping that I'm then setting them up for a future where they are curious people, and they like to be critical.
Yeah, and I think it's quite interesting. Recently, I've been experimenting about actual location of the books in the house and how it affects behavior. So,
Oh, okay.
initially, I would have like a designated spot for like reading, as in like the books are in one location and we all sit there and read.
Okay.
Later, I moved it to I scattered some books around the house, so if the mood ever took for my
Right.
son, he would just pick it up and read it. Um, and also, I even to this day I put some books in my son's bedroom, uh, so that when he's just about to sleep, it's part of the routine. So he would have his bath,
Yeah.
and then he would spend 10 or 15 minutes before bed just going through like children's books of various kinds. And I think it's very important to build like a set of disciplined, routined actions, because then it becomes a
Yeah.
habit, right?
Yeah.
And habits are very important, and it's a great way to dispel bad behavior or bad traits like laziness, right? Because if it's part of your routine, you do it regardless. Like brushing your teeth, you wouldn't skip
Yeah.
that once it's routine.
Yeah.
And it's only a few minutes a day, and my son loves it now. So like he would rush out of the bath and say it's book time, and he just sort of self-soothe with it in a sense. So he'd just pick the book and go through it himself. And we as parents try to be a bit creative. So when we're reading the book, we don't follow the narrative. Like we just make
Yeah,
up
yeah,
some random stuff. And Musa's like, oh no, he's trying to communicate you're doing it wrong and go back a few pages and
yeah.
start. And that's really great for the development because then they're realizing that okay, it's different to what I've understood, right? And it's such a young age. I mean, as he gets older, I'm sure he'll be able to, be reading to us and making up his own stories, and that's creativity that you're inculcating, right?
That's so funny. You're doing it wrong, Dad. Yeah, my son says that all the time. Like, if for example, I'll test him with like maybe in his numbers and his Arabic alphabet or English alphabet, and might say something like A B 3 4, and he'll be like, "No, you're doing it wrong, Dad. It's
Oh
A
my
B
God.
C." It's a it's quite fun. I remember watching like a viral clip of a father reciting Quran, and then he would like, maybe miss a word or something in front of his daughter, and his daughter would correct him. I'm not encouraging that we purposely make mistakes when reciting Quran, but it was just the example of teaching your children in that type of way, where they're taking ownership of the learning in a sense. Um, and
Yeah,
would you say that uh, in terms of reading stories to your kids at bedtime, you're mentioning I like to do that as well. I like to get the books out just before they go to sleep, maybe
mm,
even if they're sipping some milk or something, and going through a book and maybe multiple books, couple of different stories. I think it's great, and I think that maybe I don't know, maybe I'm stereotyping, I'm not sure, but do you feel like there is an issue in our culture, maybe South Asians, maybe Muslims in general, where fathers are not doing that, or maybe they never used to do that? I'm not sure if I'm projecting something here, but it kind of what comes to mind is that that's not generally a man's thing to do in our culture, and it might be more of a feminine trait. But I think that it's very important for the father to take that role. I mean, definitely the mother also should be doing that, but I think um, making sure the father has that hand in before they go to sleep, they are reading, or the father's communicating stories to them. I think that's quite a powerful bonding experience. What do you think?
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I can't really comment too much about, I guess, this generation of say Asian, their culture and how they adapt. To be honest, I mean, I can tell you about
Yeah,
my experience. I know my wife does actually do 70 or 80%, or maybe even close to 90% of that bedtime reading activity, and that's partly it's not by design really. It wasn't intentional, but for me it's because of work and commitments, and that,
yeah, yeah,
for me
of
it's
course,
important
yeah,
to recognize that, like, men shouldn't be afraid of, am I should I have a 50-50 balance in certain things. I think it's absolutely fine. um,
yeah,
but yeah, where possible I engage with my son that way, but most of my engagement actually is quite physical, to be honest with you. I
okay,
really I wrestle my son. I take him to the park. I keep him physically active, um, and occasionally I'll bring up, a physical book. Otherwise, I would be like oral, just verbal communication, and
yeah,
get him to say the alphabet or sing, certain rhymes that he's picked up from various places. And by the way, there's so much amazing YouTube content for Muslim children.
yeah, yeah,
It's so widely available, so it's really no excuse. Just keep an eye on see what they see. But I don't have a problem necessarily with uh, sharing time with my son in that way, even with an iPad and just watching what he watches and sing along with him. There's a great one that we love, which is, look it up, folks. It's called Upsy Daisy, and it's Time to Go to the Masjid. Lovely song, animation. I sing it along with my son every time. And whenever we're out, so typically, in the past, my son would say, "Oh, are we going out to the shops?" in his own language. But really now
right.
he's saying, "Is it time to go to the masjid? Is it time to go to the masjid?" Because he's heard that song. So it's a great way to encourage them, right? Having that repetition. Children learn by
Yeah.
repetition. So
That's amazing. So, bro, to wrap it up in our kind of final sort of discussion, you have kind of this maybe business on the side, which is to help people with developing their careers, career coaching, you could call it,
Mm-hmm.
and just helping people to navigate themselves in their work life. Um, Alongside that, you also have a full time job.
Yeah.
Alongside that, you're also a parent. Not only any parent, a parent that has to be constantly worried about their child's nutritional needs as well. And you also find time to read. So, how do you possibly find the time to do all of this? What are some of your time management techniques? And I'm guessing that you try to teach this to some of your clients as well,
Yeah.
to make sure that when they are progressing in their career, that they are striking a good balance between work and home. So, what would you say are some of your tips when it comes to that?
Yeah. So first of all, it's really hard. I don't think anyone has perfected work-life balance. If you find someone, let me know because I would love to learn what they do. But for me, yeah, I mean, the first lesson is for me personally is that you do drop the ball from time to time, right? Like at the moment, I'm behind on some of my reading, so I'm part of I'm part of a couple of reading circles that are, I guess, the amalgamation, big word, but like synthesization of
That's an even bigger word.
yeah, synthesizing Western tradition with a traditional Islamic understanding. So
Okay.
it's like Islamic studies with a bit of a lens on what's happening in our current time in the Western world. So I'm involved with that group, but I'm behind like a full month on that reading, and I've had to drop out. So for that month. Um, and that's because of work commitments. So I think the first lesson is recognize that things go up and down, but don't be discouraged by that. Um, Always ensure that you have like a portion of your day that is a blocked slot for any kind of development. So
Okay.
sometimes, for me, it's like don't abandon your evening dhikr, for example, right? Spend 15 minutes, and that's your time. Be a bit selfish with that and guard that. And that habit is actually going to permeate throughout the rest of your activities in your life, I think. Um, but don't be afraid if you slip because it happens. But in terms of balancing, yeah, I find it challenging, but I do have a few things that I use as go-to tools. So one is an app called Focus To Do, and it's just a
Okay.
way of
Yeah.
organizing your activities. So go and check that out. Um, Also, that app in particular uses something called the Pomodoro technique, which some people might be familiar with. It's essentially you focus for 25 minutes and then you take a 5 minute break, and there's no excuses. And it's a great way to psychologically trick yourself, really, to get things done. I won't dwell on it too much. People can go and research it, but it's a well known technique. Um, and then also I try and occasionally just remind myself of the value of the additional activities I'm doing, because I think we often forget why it's such hard work. I mean, I have to put in effort. What's the reward here?
Yeah.
And for me, specifically about reading, is this whole idea of enriching yourself as a human being. Um, I recently listened to a talk shared by one of the brothers about what it means to be educated. Again, we're
Mm.
going a bit deep philosophically, but it's interesting. Like, you have a limited time on the earth, right? At this point, they say the average lifespan is what, 60 to 70, maybe 80, right? Tops.
Yeah.
So your time is limited. The amount of resources you can access are also limited, in the sense that Google is unlimited. You could read anything, but you can't read everything, right? So you need to
Yeah.
know, how am I going to spend my time and what should I read and why? Where is it leading me? And of course, you have your set of Islamic studies portion that you should have in your day. But also, for me, it's about understanding where you are and how did we get here, and what underlies, what is the paradigm, what is the view that underlies the way I think, and
Mm.
can I challenge that? And Islam is a great way to, as a criterion to check whether or not that's the best way to live or not. But for me, that's the value. And so I remind myself from time to time that, okay, it's difficult, And the books that I'm reading are difficult to access as well. They're not just like magazines that you can flick through.
Yeah.
It requires time to think. But reminding yourself of the value is important. And then also communicating well with your family is such a huge thing. Um,
Right.
your family have a right upon you, your time as well. And so just finding that balance, it comes from great communication about your why. Like, why am I spending time doing this? Right? Why
Yeah.
is it valuable? And I try and tie it back to how it benefits them. Reading, the way that we think in the modern world, without getting too philosophical, is about utility, right? What is the value of this? What is the benefit? And reading has a lot that you can, talk for ages about. Um, but mainly for the family, I would say, is to encourage them to reading is a cornerstone of change, right? If you can change yourself, educate yourself, look at what it produces. And oftentimes, the best example used is Malcolm X. Someone who was essentially, I would almost argue, almost literate to an extent. He had a
Yeah.
few hundred words in his vocabulary. At one point, he was in jail. And he came out of that experience as an avid reader, and it transformed him. He was as powerful as a lawyer in his communication. So really, that's what I see as a vision for the future with my family, and I have to start with me. That's what I realize. So that's what motivates me to have the time. And whenever I slip, I just remind myself that, hey, okay, you slip, you just get back on the horse. It's okay.
Nice, nice. Jazakallah khair for coming on, Zarar. I really appreciate it. Alhamdulillah, it was a really good discussion. And inshallah, if you will accept our invite, we'll have you on another episode as well.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair, barakallahu feekum. It was a pleasure being here, and I'm happy to come on again. And thank you for your time.
No problem. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.